Hi, everybody. This is John from Confluence. We're going to hang out for a few more minutes here while we have a few more people join us, and then we'll start our presentation probably just a few minutes after 5:30. So I know some folks haven't used Teams before, so we always have a few late entries here, and we'll try to give them a few minutes to join in on the virtual meeting. Meanwhile, here, for the sake of everybody joining our meeting, if you haven't used Teams before and you're on a computer, up in your upper right-hand corner, there's a little microphone symbol. Usually for these meetings, everyone who enters on mute. So there's a mute button up there. It's a little microphone that you can click and unclick here towards the end of our meeting if you have questions that you want to ask. Meanwhile, if during the course of the presentation you have questions that you want to ask, there's a little chat button icon up there in the right-hand corner. You're welcome to click on that and write out your question, or there's a little hand symbol, which is essentially like raising your hand in class, and we can see that as well and call on you. And so, yeah, thank you, Lyle. So that's the comment button, the hand button that Lyle was just pointing out, and then the microphone button is the mute and unmute. So we'll give everybody a few more minutes for any folks coming into the meeting here late, and then we'll get started. And Jess, if you have any wonderful intro stuff that you'd like to tell everybody, please feel free.
I'll have to think long and hard about that. Yeah.
Sing a Christmas song, maybe.
Maybe Happy Holidays to everyone. Yes. I thought I heard snow out our window, but I don't think we're getting any. No such luck.
We'll, for the sake of the group here, we'll plan on getting the presentation going at 5:35. So thanks for your patience here while everyone rolls in. Okay, It's 5:35. We'll get this presentation on the road here. First, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to call in. I'm sure we'll have a few more people join us while we're in process. But obviously, we're here today to talk about the new public park space in downtown Watertown. And so just to cover some of the kind of formalities of doing a virtual meeting here. Everyone who enters the meeting will enter in on mute. So that just helps us keep down the background noise a little bit. And so we want to make sure everybody can hear this as good as they can. Lyle, can you pull over that screen again with the hand and the comment box? So up in the upper right-hand corner, if you haven't used Teams before, there's a few different things up there for you to look at and use. The first is the microphone button. That's what keeps you on mute or gives you the ability to talk. Here towards the end of the presentation, we'll open it up for people who want to ask questions and discuss any items that we go through during the course of the presentation. Further over to the left, there is a hand signal there. That's literally something that you can push on to raise your hand, that if you do while we're talking and want to throw out a question, just go ahead and please raise your hand, and we'll be monitoring that and hopefully be able to see it and have you speak. And then right to the left of that is a little dialogue box. That's just kind of a instant messaging thing that goes out to the comment chat that goes out to the whole group. So if you have a comment that you'd rather put out there or a question you'd ask while we are presenting, please feel free to use that, and we'll be monitoring that as well. Okay, so with that, this is a project we are very excited to be part of. My name is John Jacobson. I'm with Confluence Landscape Architects. Our office that we're presenting out of today is down in Sioux Falls, but we are a regional landscape architecture and planning firm with 9 offices located throughout the Midwest, and we do a lot of public infrastructure and recreation and planning projects similar to the plaza. So as part of our design team, we'll run through this a little bit more, but we have a number of other design firms that we're working with to help provide this new space with the city of Watertown. So some of the things that we're going to run through for you today during our meeting, I'll go through a little bit more about our team, some history on the project and its process up to this point. We'll review the overall schedule as it sits right now for the project, and what we see that process being over the next few months. We're going to go through a lot of the program elements that have been discussed that can comprise this potential plaza. We're going to run through 3 design concepts for you that we've been working on and discussing for your feedback and comment. And then lastly, we'll be opening up for some discussion. So as I mentioned, my name is John Jacobson with Confluence. We do located out of Sioux Falls here. We've been in South Dakota for over 15 years doing what we do and specializing in a lot of public facilitation, public infrastructure projects, those kind of things. We take a lot of pride in, our projects. We don't like to sit in an office and just design things. Our projects, we really want to be focused on public feedback and facilitation. Of course, COVID makes it a little bit more difficult for us to be able to do that safely. And that's why we're having this virtual meeting instead, so we can still kind of continue to get people's feedback and thoughts about the creations of spaces like this public plaza. And then as part of the facilitation, we will post a survey link at the end of this presentation, which will be one more vehicle for everybody participating in our meeting today, but also for anybody who doesn't, can give their feedback on that as well. So, and so you can see kind of where we're located throughout the upper Midwest here. And so ultimately here, our team, as I mentioned, is made up of Confluence. We are the prime consultant for the city of Watertown. As part of our team, we have Infrastructure Design Group. They are the civil engineer and surveying firm and based out of Watertown there. And Vanessa is on our call from IDG with us here tonight. We'll be working with co-op architects on some of the specialty architectural features, such as a potential stage and those kind of things that we'll discuss as we go through the project here today. RISE structural engineers, they will provide the structural engineering on any structures projects. Hydrodramatics out of St. Louis, Missouri. They're a design and engineering firm that specializes in water features, of which, potential water feature has been talked about as part of this plaza. And then Mettler Sickmiller out of Aberdeen will be our electrical engineer and lighting designer. And of course, the design team's one part of it. There's a little quick shot of everybody there, but an important part of the team, as I'd already mentioned, is the public and the stakeholder groups that we work with. So as part of this project, the city of Watertown has created a kind of what we call a steering committee, our primary stakeholder group that we work with to get even more intimate feedback and review of all the different decisions and details that go into a project like this. So the steering committee members are listed there in the graphic right now, and we've had one meeting with them in preparation for this meeting today, and the information that really between working with the city, working with our steering committee, and then working with the general public, it's our hope that when we have that many different facets as part of the public planning process, that we don't leave any stones unturned and that we make sure we vet the project out as good as we can. So a little bit about the project history. So when this was well, first in front of you, you see kind of an overall graphic of the project site that we're looking at for the development of this plaza, just south of the county food fair or county fair food store, right along East Kemp in the heart of downtown, adjacent to the existing Watertown Seniors Activity Center, the Palace Apartments, and of course the Community Foundation. Right now, it's essentially a parking lot for the most part and circulation, and of course with 3rd Street going through it. Right now, the overall idea is to vacate the portion of 3rd Street that splits the 2 parking lots right now and maintain the utilities that exist in that roadway, but capture that for part of the public space that we want to develop. Just a few shots. I know everyone is intimately familiar with these spots, but just want to give you an idea of kind of how the potential or the existing space relates to the fabric of downtown. There's a little bit of streetscape there right now with tree plantings along Kemp, and of course the corner node and welcome sign there. And just a few shots from the intersection. So overall, from a schedule review point of view, so right now, as I mentioned, we're in our first public meeting here in the middle of December. We've already had one steering committee meeting in which we vetted a number of concepts that we wanted to pass by the steering committee in preparation for this meeting. Based on that feedback, we've got 3 different concepts that we're going to be reviewing with you today. And our design process will take us through January, February, and March. with the hopeful anticipation of being able to bid a project in April and start construction during the summer, go through the entire summer and early fall with construction, and then be able to complete a project at the end of the year. So as you'll see as we go through this, there's a number of variable parts that have a lot of fluctuation in them. There's some adjacent redevelopment that's going to be occurring in conjunction with this project. So we want to make sure that it all fits together just right. We don't want to get too far out in front of anything or too far behind anything that's occurring in this part of downtown, because we want to make sure that all the potential improvements work in harmony with each other. And so the schedule may vary a little bit as we go through it, but right now these are our major milestones. And so, as I mentioned, we'll have a survey at the end of this. That survey link will be available to you, and then that's the survey itself will be open through December 31st. Okay, so when some of the leaders within the community were discussing a potential project here, they had approached us to develop a very preliminary concept to see what its potential was for this kind of space. This is an image of that concept that was developed. Some of the major program elements that were discussed at that time in 2018 was having a raised stage, providing some sort of ice rink during the wintertime, having a water feature splash pad. For anybody who's not familiar with what a splash pad is, essentially it's a water feature that's within a section of pavement, so there's no standing water. So it can be something really pretty to look at when there's no one in it, but children of all ages and adults can, participate in the water feature with different jets and nozzles and all those kind of things through the course of the summertime. And it's a real interactive type water feature beyond just the positive aesthetics and sounds that it gives. We wanted to make sure that there was space for temporary events and tents, with some appropriate entry signage and monuments for downtown, landscape improvements and tree plantings, perimeter ornamental fencing to help separate from the alley, and potentially some new parking, both within the parking space, but also along Kemp. So this is a bird's eye view that we developed of that original concept. We don't necessarily like to design in a vacuum. This was done with a little bit of input from the city and the Development Foundation. But really we just wanted to see what was feasible and kind of set the table to see if this project was actually going to be able to occur. So as we go through this design process, we will begin to develop graphics such as you're seeing this that ultimately illustrate what the final design product is going to be and the goal that we're going to be working towards. I think one of the things that's important to kind of keep in your mind too, based on these images, is that we want to design a space that is not only successful through the summer when the weather is nice, but we want to have a space that's active and used through the winter as well, and kind of remains and is a part of that iconic focal point of downtown. So just wanted to, as I had mentioned, we had our first steering committee here a couple weeks ago, and there was some comments and feedbacks that came back from the committee of important items, and we wanted to put those out there for everybody's consideration as well when it comes to kind of different of getting a project like this done. So first of all, some must-have items from the steering committee's point of view included a stage, a flexible event space, and an interactive water feature. There was a lot of discussion about the incorporation of an ice rink, potential fitness area, and a playground for multi-generational year-round rec activities. So, this is the reason why we like to go through all this feedback, because in our original concept that you just saw, a number of these features weren't even in there. So that's why we want to make sure it's tailored towards Watertown. The park should be able to incorporate access to public restrooms, winter warming areas, again, to be able to facilitate year-round activities, and rentable adjacent spaces or retail spaces with possible redevelopment of buildings, and potentially look at things like rental income for parts of the space. So if we develop a plaza where some of it can be used for, family gatherings and those kind of things, some of the potential income that can come off of that is important for continued operations and maintenance of a space like this. So to be able to incorporate space for farmers market, festivals, holiday events, craft fairs, stage/shelter renters, all that kind of stuff, we want to make sure that there's continual activity in this kind of space. Some other important comments from the steering committee included that the park should be a mix of old and new, essentially to get at more of a timeless kind of representation of the park. So once you're within the space, you can't really tell if it's 10 years old or 20 years old, and just fits in with the context and the fabric of Watertown. We want to recognize the history of the community in conjunction with having arts and sculpture, and consider incorporation of the historic clock tower or related elements in the plaza of the downtown area. And then lastly, stage placement is important for the project's success. They want to make sure that we consider sun angles that impacts performers and viewers in its development. The development of parking could be incorporated on the south side along Kemp and be able to be accessed by local businesses. And then kind of a bigger, broader picture that we wanted to make sure we capture is consider a downtown event coordinator to work with the city and the downtown association to be able to program the space so that it's used throughout the course of the year and that there's always activity there, because ultimately the programming and use of the space is what's going to make it successful, just not the design. So we don't want to lose track of that. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand it off to Lyle Pudwell with Confluence here in Sioux Falls, and he's going to run us through a lot of the program elements that can comprise these plazas and the various concepts that we've developed for your feedback.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so leading into the design, one of the exercises that we like to do is we call it some visual dialogue or visual imagery. And the goal of this exercise is just to kind of clearly communicate the potential features that could be found as part of the ultimate finished concept for the plaza, and kind of open the door to what the potential is for the development. So what we do is we pull images that kind of convey a variety of features, but group them into kind of categories so that the viewers or our stakeholders can kind of take a look at it and get an understanding of the variety of options, and then kind of make a decision or provide feedback of whether or not these are desirable elements to include. So what we're really not looking for in this is kind of picking a specific item or looking at a specific detail at this time, but just kind of understanding what the potential is. So The first element in kind of our visual dialogue exercise is a stage, and I think that's something that most everybody is familiar with, either and has participated or been to an event. But there's a wide variety of scales in how they function. But certainly from the feedback we've gotten, that's something that has some initial support from the stakeholder group and the public. So the interactive water feature, this is something that is fairly common in an urban plaza such as this. Again, this is something that in that summer season can be a real attraction and can draw viewers or visitors to the plaza and really encourage kind of those longer stays for the visitors that are there for other activities such as the farmers market or just shopping and kind of that hanging out in the plaza that may occur informally. So you see a number of different ways to execute it. A lot of these are showing just kind of ground level sprays, but there can be tower elements or elevated pieces that become part of it and kind of really enhance the experience. There can be lighting that's incorporated as part of it. And then as we look at fitting it in the plaza, one of the things that we like to consider is the space around these features, making it kind of comfortable for viewing, for kind of sitting and observing, and make it really kind of an attractive kind of holistic element. John mentioned flexible event space, and that can be interpreted in a number of ways. The markets as part of events is certainly part of that. So planning where the food trucks, planning where the vendor tents would go, building in the infrastructure so that there's electricity, there's water, maybe shade, thinking about where the people that are coming to shop or grab lunch, where they can sit nearby and have a comfortable, relatable space nearby. There's also other kind of pop-up activities that can occur, whether it's bringing in temporary ping pong tables or beanbags events, movie night, all of those type of things that programming can support in a space like this plaza. So kind of thinking ahead with the design so that it can easily be converted into these temporary or permanent event spaces. John mentioned the winter recreation, and that obviously is important for that year-round activation of the space. The first thing that we typically think of is skating when we think of that winter recreation, but there's a lot of other kind of activities that can go with that, whether it's the seasonal snow sculpting events that can happen as part of the programming of it. Winter lighting is really something that can extend the use of and the attraction of the plaza. So thinking about if there's a desire to kind of build in the infrastructure to make that easy to accommodate. And then there's other things, in doing some travels or research in these type of spaces, you see some kind of innovative design pieces where I think this is an image from Winnipeg, maybe, where they have these pods that they bring in to kind of create these sheltered areas. So maybe in conjunction with the skating, you have these temporary shelters that make the elements a little bit more bearable for the visitors. Recreation, and whether that is purely recreational or the fitness aspect of it, is something that is typically considered as part of this plaza space like this as well. So That could be anything from a formal area that is set up for workouts. It can be play equipment that is designed and incorporated with the kind of the more traditional play equipment, so that you can get a workout in that way. Or it's the informal, whether it's bocce ball or even things such as like these large scale game boards, the kind of movable seating, anything that kind of encourages that activation and interaction within the park. Artistic lighting, and this is something that can really give a space such as this as an identity. Obviously, we'll have kind of the safety lighting and the ground level lighting accommodated, so it has a nice feel to the space. Everybody feels comfortable within it in the evenings, but there can be ways to, or spaces within the plaza that have unique elements that again make it memorable, give it that identity, give it something for people to talk about, an element that ends up on social media, help with that branding and marketing of the space. Fencing and screens can have kind of a unique element or characteristic to them as well, and tie into the other details and features of the plaza. So we will likely see some of the park or the plaza have some perimeter fencing to help control traffic, whether that is providing security for an event or to kind of control movement of people through the space. We can do that with traditional fencing and screening, or we can look at a combination of that with some more artistic, kind of an elevated aesthetic where we're doing, cut panels or fencing in combination with landscape or decorative elements that kind of enhance that aesthetic and give it, again, a higher level aesthetic and more unique identity. Paving can also be a piece of that identity to kind of set it apart and make it a unique space, whether it's pavers incorporated in certain areas of the plaza, or looking at the jointing of standard concrete to make it more unique, or looking at the coloration of that concrete and the texture of the surfaces. So as we move through the design and the design evolves, that might be a component that we look at to kind of again enhance the identity of the plaza. Site furnishings will come into the concept and be a piece of the final design, whether that's large planters that have seasonal foliage and vegetation that gets switched out, even into the winter time, that can be converted over into spruce tips or dogwood branches that really kind of creates that inviting feel to the plaza. Seating, I think there's certainly a place for kind of traditional seating, the benches within the plaza, but flexible seating like tables and chairs or picnic tables can allow a little bit more inviting use and activity within the spaces. And then there's even numerous examples of kind of these unique elements, whether there's these kind of large stone-like pieces or seat walls that we build in that really kind of can define a space with the nature of their character. Signage is something that we've been thinking about and talking about as we develop the concepts, and there's kind of two levels of that signage. We'll likely have some monument signs that kind of greet visitors and recognize potential donors and really kind of announce the identity of the plaza. But then in combination with that, you know, there's a history with the site. There's a history with Watertown. There's a number of stories that could be told within the park that we could take a look at. Incorporation of interpretive signs that get integrated within the landscape and the fabric of the space as another level of interaction with the visitor. And then the landscape itself obviously impacts the character of the plaza. We will likely and certainly have a base level of landscape involved with the space, but there can be you know, formal plantings, you know, such as big swaths of grass, or very intentional specific formal shapes that can define the character of the plaza. So as we look at those entries specifically into the plaza spaces and kind of the perimeter, we feel that the landscape really will have a place to help define the plaza. Sculptures and art, you know, as we talked with the steering committee and amongst ourselves in the development of the concepts, you know, it's always something that we think about as far as the incorporation of art within the plaza. There are certainly places within the concepts where we see we see a potential placeholder for art coming into the final design. It's not something that we specifically will design and include in the project, but kind of understanding and thinking forward with the concept that there is a place for it. So if something were to come forward, that we could bring it into the concept and it would have a fit. So with that, I'll transition into our preliminary design concepts. And as John mentioned, this has kind of been a process that started about a couple weeks ago now. We began with an accelerated schedule. So we came forward to our first steering committee meeting with 6 concepts that were the three pairs that were essentially kind of related to some extent, that showed different variations of a way to execute a concept. So after some feedback, we went through a refinement process and now have 3 concepts to present to the steering committee and in this public meeting that are kind of a progression of the development of this work. So these certainly aren't a pick one and that's what we're running with type of process. Many times there's hybrids that continue to evolve out of this. So keep that in mind as you're kind of evaluating these. But we'll begin kind of by walking through each of them specifically, and then
and Lyle, one thing I want to mention too, if you want to back up just for a second, just from a big picture point of view, you see kind of the 3 concepts that we're going to go over. An important thing to note is the orange building that's in each one of the 3 concepts that you'll see there to keep in mind while we go through these. So one of the things that I mentioned at the introduction is that there's a number of redevelopment projects that are occurring or potentially going to occur. One of them is Jesse Craig's redevelopment just to the north of the Community Foundation. To the left, that's kind of the darker light blue color, darker light blue. That makes a lot of sense. But the darker color of the blues up there on the left, and then in the orange on A1, you see the existing seniors building. And what's going to happen with that is to be decided here over the course of the next couple months. And with that stays in place or goes, and potentially goes in conjunction with the redevelopment of a new building there, and what that building shape takes and what exactly it does is to be determined. And so that's not set in stone yet from our perspective. And so you'll see that our concepts try to deal with kind of some of the unknowns of that to a certain extent. And when Lyle talks about, it's not necessarily one concept over the other. It may be pieces from all of them or two of them that get integrated into each other to form the best product, but that we're going to be looking at and seeing how that potential redevelopment occurs in conjunction with the site.
Yeah, that's a good point, John, is that each of these concepts, and I'll go back to it as well, is, each of these concepts, depending on what the future is of this development on the east, they each could be somewhat modified to accommodate a new or the existing buildings at that location. So as you're kind of evaluating the options, don't let that necessarily weight your opinion in one way or another. So I'll start off with our first one, A1, and again, this is kind of a updated version of a couple of concepts that we had initially developed. So in this option, I'll start with kind of the big major elements at the beginning here. The stage sits kind of at the southwest of the site and would address the lawn area in the center of the space, facing to the northeast. So that's kind of our major landmark piece within this. So as an event were to unfold, we'd have our entrances off of Camp and 3rd to the north. We have a couple of entrances coming off of that, and then to the northwest out of the county fair parking lot as well. We would anticipate traffic coming that direction. With the Parkside Place project, there is going to be some kind of interaction with that frontage here with doorways and walk-up windows and such. So this is really kind of a plaza space that will likely develop off to the northwest. So think about activity occurring out there, a group populating the main event lawn. So as that is going on in the backside, we have a space defined for our flexible events. So whether that's food trucks occurring back there or vendor tents, we've got enough space to accommodate that, and would anticipate the infrastructure again to be able to plug in or water service available to wash down paving or tables if need be up in that direction. Circulating around then, kind of at the terminus of 3rd Street, we have kind of a double entry point into the plaza space. And then this is where we've placed in this concept the interactive water feature. So what you're seeing within this is a shade structure, whether that's kind of a sail structure or more of a permanent roof structure that would be to be determined at this point, but some type of shading in that space, a seat wall as kind of a barrier, but also as that informal separation and seating element back in through there. And then this is where kind of the interactive feature would kind of be at the end point of that space, with kind of good sun exposure and engaging to the south. Across the way then, from the water feature is where we'd have a placeholder for a playground. And the nature of this playground, it could be traditional play equipment like you would see in a park, but it could be climbers. We could look at the fitness equipment as discussed, a number of different opportunities here where that playground equipment could be incorporated. At this location, there's kind of a nice relationship because with the interactive water feature, because you would likely have a lot of activity back and forth in through there. So as a hub in between and kind of fill that space and make it inviting. We're showing some additional shade structures over paving in there, so you could be, thinking again of how this space would function, both in event and non-event times. But there could be a performance going on. You could be back here in the shade, with kids going back and forth and still be part of the activity as this would set up. Moving down then to the east, we're showing a generous space at the face of the existing activity center, where again some vendor tents could come into place. Into play here. So maybe this is where farmers markets would be. You could have vendors under the existing canopy and tents on the opposite side, and then flow through traffic of in the pedestrian way here. But then also that group that shows up for that event, really has good access and really is encouraged to stay and hang around with the water feature and the playground and the shade kind of nearby and the open kind of shady lawn. And this would be kind of a more typical park-like setting here, just to kind of hang out on those event times. So from the south, I mentioned this is kind of the main entrance way. So what we're kind of indicating here would be, again, that perimeter fencing to kind of close off the area. Maybe transitions into a seat wall or sign wall in this zone right through here. So we got the bump out in the street where the pedestrians kind of collect and gather, the entryway in, maybe flagpoles at that entranceway, a feature or a focal point that could occur opposite, but really just kind of this really neat arrival experience that we're trying to create with this.
I think it's important to note too, Lau, when it comes to that edge development, when we talk about a fence or some sort of monument, sign wall, and those types of things, those are all things that aren't meant to stop you from viewing into the space. They're just kind of a subtle delineation of what is the park space and what's kind of public right away. So and maybe it's something that requires a ticket or needs to, monitor attendance levels or whatever. There's some funnel points which they can take people in and out, and it's able to kind of help define the space. So we don't look at it as a barrier. We just look at it as an accentuation of space, and it's more transparent, but yet it's defined.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, we don't want it to feel secluded. It really want it to be inviting, but also allow those views in, both to encourage activity, but also for monitoring and safety as well. So a couple last points in the plans, and you'll see this consistent amongst the three, is we've got these asterisks that are shown, kind of identified, and those are potentially those icon pieces, whether it's art or signage or a seasonal thing that gets rotated out. But the intent is to kind of place those at the ends of viewpoints, as ways to kind of encourage people to pass through the space. This one in particular at the southwest, thinking of how how people will engage with it on the perimeter too, creating a space there where groups can populate. Maybe there's a neat feature on the backside of the stage where or signage where that's where you take your selfies, take pictures. We're thinking through that as well and creating those opportunities so that that people can get those photos taken and help spread it across social media to kind of market the activities of the plaza.
One thing I wanted to mention too about Kemp Avenue is the reconstruction of the streetscape along there will be part of the project, and you see a nice wide pedestrian walk, but also some updated diagonal parking there, along with kind of an expanded bump out in the street, where Lau was talking about kind of the more grand entrance. So what that bump out does is provide us a little bit more landscape and pedestrian area, but also shortens that crossing point across Kemp to the south. And you'll see that feature is kind of consistent through all three of the concepts that we're going to present to you.
So just a quick diagram to illustrate the activities and the type of things that we could see happening here. The temporary vendor spaces, the splash pad, the playground or fitness, just the informal seating that could occur in this more park-like setting, the presentations and activities occurring on the stage, and then the dining and recreation opportunities around the big event lawn. So one of the things that with each concept that we want to have a little bit of a grasp on too is what that ultimate crowd capacity would be, for a major event. So you're seeing here is kind of an example of maybe a moderate sized crowd populating the plaza. So you've got your main event at the stage, people circulating throughout, patronizing the vendors, taking advantage of the play spaces. So in kind of the main stage area alone in this concept, and we use about 10 square feet per person as a guide for kind of a dense crowd in this space. But that would give at that rate that would give this area in through here about a 1,200 person capacity, to fill in for an event. So it's a little bit more dense than what we're showing, but certainly possible with the space that is in that concept. And then kind of again, not wanting to kind of leave the winter activities out of the conversation. Again, we see the potential for the stage to be utilized for some of those winter activities, depending on how weather cooperates. But in the middle of the lawn space is the potential for a skate pond. We've talked about whether that's natural, just a frozen surface in a depression, or synthetic ice. The group is also considering or discussed refrigerated, but that obviously is a much more investment versus the other two, and would take up a considerable amount of the budget. So there's decisions to be made there as far as the ice is concerned, but there's numerous other activities that could occur. A few other things that we're showing that's signified in this graphic, the snowflakes, could be those sculptures or snow sculpture type of pieces, or like is recently installed on the streetscape, the large oversized holiday ornaments and sleigh features. You could really transform the entire park into that kind of winter holiday experience with lighting and elements that could make it an attraction. So moving on to the second concept, this one kind of positions the stage more to the north, facing the south. So all of the viewers that would be in the event lawn would kind of have their backs to the sun in a typical summer event. This one, you'll note, we're showing kind of the footprint of a potential development on there, kind of arbitrary size at this point, but just showing how that could develop and engage. With the stage at this position, knowing that we're going to be viewing kind of the backside of County Fair, the alleyway, and kind of some of the commercial space to the north. This we've kind of taken advantage of the layout to really buffer that north with some landscape, maybe small ornamental trees, a low ground level shrub in some of the areas or perennials, but really kind of extending the line of the stage for screening to really present well to the south. So, in an event then, again, we anticipate entry off of the north, secondary entry at the southwest, but again, the primary entrance is coming off of this bump out in camp and the node. So in this concept, we've kind of narrowed it down to a single entrance point. So maybe there's a tower element, maybe an overhead structure, some seat wall incorporated with it, landscape, flags happening at that point as well, to really kind of give this grand entrance and welcoming experience into the space. So you walk into this space and the concept. To the right would be that flexible event space where again, maybe there's storefronts that could engage this, but there could be vendor tents that would set up along here and then seating in between underneath a shade canopy. To the left then, or to the west as you come in, that's where the interactive water feature kind of fell into place. The shade structures again, so thinking through activities, that interactive water feature and those shade elements really could be fully activated and support viewing of the stage once you're in here. And then the relationship between the shade structure and the playground is really pretty convenient and kind of flanks the sides of the event lawn in this concept. The perimeter then, as we kind of circulate around, you can see we're using kind of masses of landscape again to kind of separate the areas, but also kind of give that little bit of a sense of enclosure here. At the secondary plaza entrance, that seems to naturally have a really good flow coming from the west in. So I think giving that some elements that maybe mirror to some level the main entrance. So maybe there's smaller columns, a short seat wall, again to kind of control traffic, but kind of give some consistency to the design elements through the space. And then the plaza up at the Parkside building that's going up, anticipating that, knowing that would be there, and the food trucks would be available at a position there to kind of really have a strong relationship. If there isn't an event going on, the lawn could be set up with just picnic tables, and there'd be an opportunity to bring more food trucks to the opposite side as well if there was a demand for that. The focal points in this concept then, obviously the structure would be a main one. The interactive water feature could have that kind of iconic notable design to it, and then kind of coming straight through maybe a focal point within a seat wall that kind of creates a center hub and a transition between those spaces, and then thinking through what that stage design is as we get to that final design of the stage, or the development of the design of the stage, knowing that really could be unique in itself and have some iconic construction or signage as part of it. Again, that graphic that kind of highlights those spring, summer, fall activities through the area, and then the population and during a kind of a crowded event. Again, this one has a little bit smaller footprint in that center lawn area. It's still around that 900 to as far as a capacity in here. The thing with these is that there's, we really stopped kind of counting capacity beyond, maybe a 20-foot buffer beyond the footprint of the lawn area, but there's certainly a lot of overflow space at the perimeter that can enjoy and take advantage of a performance that's going on the stage. Winter activities then, this one would have a little bit smaller footprint for that skate area if we chose to incorporate some trees within that lawn space. The trees would be fairly spaced, so that canopy would be, there'd be little islands of shade eventually with those, which could be really comfortable and a real nice aspect of that space, but it would limit a little bit that footprint of a skate pond within there. And then the extension of those seasonal displays or interactive elements that could be brought into the plaza and incorporated, including a placeholder for an evergreen within there for the kind of holiday lighting. The third concept then is kind of the largest footprint of all three. This one, the stage is positioned just beyond the utilities that run through 3rd Street. So we've kind of kept it east of the utilities in there so that we're not interrupting that. We're showing a gesture with the building to kind of allow the stage to be positioned as to the north as far as we would feel comfortable, but then maximize the viewing area out in front. It really kind of creates this engagement and kind of tie-in with the building that could have a nice feel and use with that relationship. So the stage again is kind of flanked by landscape, and we're looking at ways to buffer it and to kind of screen that north activity a little bit. Opposite of the stage then, with that being such a large area, the entry point in kind of circulates both up to the development, which kind of gives a really nice, desirable pathway up to the entrances that could occur along that face, but then kind of a looping path that would swing up and connect up to Parkside and the county fair parking to the north. So it kind of has a really nice kind of flow through feel to it. At the south entrance then, it'd be neat to have kind of a tower element or something larger as an icon at that space. We've created some screening, but also an enhanced kind of entrance experience with some ornamental trees and landscape at that point, and then a seat wall along that edge that can kind of allow for people to kind of congregate and maybe wait in this zone, but also it pushes traffic through and kind of encourages people to stay on the pathways as you cross through the park. Off to the west then, as you enter in, a little bit of a divider with a seat wall, kind of a focal point occurring there, some shade happening at that point. And then this concept really combines in close relationship the splash pad, the shade structure, and then the play equipment. So that combination and those two elements are really closely tied, and you could really see a lot of engagement back and forth here for kids and families using that space. This concept for the playground has a little bit of separation here to kind of corral activity within here and to maybe keep kids from running out and parents from losing track of kids as they're activating in here. And then as you go to the north, there's a wedge of lawn adjacent to the flexible event space in this concept where that could be kind of a picnic area. So you have an activity, a band or an event going on, and this really becomes your eating zone. So between the plaza space and these picnic tables and underneath the shade in this lawn, it can really serve as that market or dining space. Entrance again to the north, we're showing kind of a pull off for truck access and drop offs in through here and deliveries, so we can kind of keep that traffic outside of the main pathway of the alley. And then one thing I wanted to point out too, if I failed to mention it in the previous concepts, but each of the three concepts show some parking development to the northeast here. That space we've heard may be available for development for parking. So we're capturing some parking spaces up to the north in this concept. Highlights again of the activities, in this concept as well, with that larger footprint, not showing any parking within the kind of the plaza, study area here, kind of creates this more park-like setting to the east that really would be a nice amenity for the residents or anybody kind of pulling by. It's kind of a more intimate feel down and through there, kind of the big openness of the event plaza or in the event lawn that has some kind of separation from the streets on the north and south, and then this activity zone on the east side that kind of developed here. With the larger footprint, obviously the capacity goes up. So looking at the area directly out in front of the stage, we'd anticipate, around that 1,500 as being a total capacity directly in front of the stage. This one obviously has a pretty significant amount of overflow that could occur both east and west in this layout. So in this concept then, the skate pond could occur probably in multiple locations, depending on where this east-west crossing occurred. It could be up more by the stage, closer to the building, or down in this location. In the conversation with the skate pond, we talked about, the potential for some support space in one of the buildings for rentals or for warming, restrooms, those type of things happening. So with that, John, I guess any final comments on the concepts, or Jess, before we move into question and answer?
Sure, you bet. And go ahead and flip to the next one, Lyle. That just shows where the survey is at. That link we have emailed out to members of the steering committee. They have that. The city of Watertown will be posting that on a lot of their social media. So you don't need to necessarily write it down really fast. That will be open until the 31st. And along with that, is our contact information is all available there, so you're welcome to contact myself, Lyle, or Jessica within Confluence, and we'd happy to exchange some emails with you or talk to you on the phone, whatever way that you'd like to get us your feedback. But the survey is an important way for us to be able to document and archive feedback, because we want to be able to, between the steering committee and our public meetings, we want to be able to document what type of feedback we received and how it influenced the ultimate design and built product. So with that, we reserved about an hour for any questions. We may not necessarily take up all that time, but we wanted to make sure that anybody who sat through the presentation had the chance to ask questions and engage with the entire group and get our perspective and answers on anything. So before we jump into that, though, I do want to say thank you to the City of Watertown for making this process as open and transparent as we're able to during the pandemic. We have a number of representatives of both the City of Watertown in our virtual meeting tonight, but also a couple of your council members. So we'd like to thank them for participating in this and trying to make this process as user-friendly as we can. So with that, I guess I'd like to open it up for questions. We didn't get any conversation during the course of the presentation. So go ahead and unmute yourself there on the right if you do have a question or a statement that you'd like to make, and we can back up to any one of the concepts and talk about them in more detail, or talk about program items in more detail. Yeah, Terry, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Lyle. And Lyle, you touched on this. And for the audience, Terry Kelly with the Park and Rec and a member of the steering committee. I did receive 2 or 3 texts throughout the presentation. And Lyle, at the end, you did discuss the restrooms. That was one thing I heard, we didn't cover, but, to kind of maybe beat the answer before the question is, we are planning on, correct, to have brick and mortar restrooms, working with developer Jesse Craig in those developments. So I feel that probably was a question I just wanted to beat and get the answer out there, that the committee does believe that's an essential part of the development, to have true brick and mortar restroom availability for the space, and not use a portable type of system. So just a comment. So thanks, Lyle and John, for that.
Yeah, no, you bet. Thanks, Terry. And I think, right now our position on that is, if the adjacent building, the senior center, does redevelop, obviously working in conjunction with that developer would be great to provide new restrooms as part of it, but also potential mechanical space for the water feature splash pad as well. So I think there's a number of details that we'll have to look over. For some reason, if the redevelopment didn't occur and the senior center stayed, we'd look at opportunities for renovation there, and or even potentially incorporating them as part of the stage as well. And I think, an important thing that we'll have to work through with the city and with the stakeholder group is make a decision as to exactly how much of a restroom facility that we do want to build. Obviously, we want it to be able to take care of what we would consider to be normal use of the plaza and even a smaller crowd. But if we were to plan restrooms for, the 1,500 person gathering, that's probably not necessarily a good use of our monies there. So we need to find a happy medium that makes sense, and then be able to provide some temporary facilities as part of that flexible space use in the future for a really big specialized event. So Terry, I think you're spot on with that comment, and thanks for mentioning that. How about anybody else out there? We've had to have piqued someone's interest in something. So, there's a good overview of the 3 concepts right now for you to reference.
Yeah, it's been real fun and exciting to kind of get through that list of programming elements and kind of see how they fit together. Those relationships are important. The experience as a user, whether it's for an event or for a quiet Saturday morning activity, we're really trying to hit on making both of those a real special for whoever is kind of populating the plaza.
Yes, Chris, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. From your guys' perspective, you guys have seen and researched a lot of parks, some history with Watertown. I know team member Vanessa, a lot of history. What do you guys think? I mean, from a professional design standpoint, which one do you guys think would fit best? Kind of flip it around a little bit. I mean, from a cost perspective or functionality, do you guys have a preference from what you know about Watertown and
Sure. No, that's a fair question. Thanks for asking it, Chris. I think I suspect if you were to ask Jessica, Lyle, and myself which one we liked in tandem, and we truly haven't talked about it from a consensus point of view, kind of which concept we prefer yet. So I'll kind of give you my perspective on it. I think one of the things that's important for every downtown is to kind of have a focal point and heart of the downtown. But not only that, but typically downtown is kind of the heart of the community. So I think it needs to be really expressive in that regard. So I feel like the more iconic that we can make the space, the better. And also, the more flexible the space can be, usually means that it's kind of one of the larger versions of the park, to where we can dedicate more space towards pedestrian and other activities there, recreation activities, as opposed to parking. So it's my roundabout way of saying that I don't necessarily like A, B, or C. But what I do like about all three of the concepts is trying to make them kind of as large as we can, and have it develop, a really nice sense of space. And so all three of those do that in different ways. Myself, I really like the way B operates from the creation of a space and room from a day-to-day operation standpoint. I think one of the things that's always a struggle with these types of spaces is, just creating that flexibility I referenced, but also having it not look like it's empty space, right? During the normal heart of the day when it's not necessarily in a major use. So that's the reason why B really appeals to me, from how all the activities are kind of located by each other. You can kind of circle throughout the space as far as its use, and it's a little bit more kind of room-like, whereas C is a little bit more park-like. You've got the bigger, more wide open spaces, some larger turf areas to relax in. So I think it's really, to me, about kind of finding that happy medium of what the community really thinks is important, both downtown, but the residents as a whole. How about you, Lyle?
Well, I was just going to say that we typically have, and when we come with concepts, there's always a couple that we aren't fans of, and the steering committee in that case has already done a pretty good job of weeding those bad ones out. So there's been some good comments and feedback to this point, but John is spot on. Is thinking about the big event is easy because you'll have a big crowd there, but designing the space and thinking through what that space feels like on a quiet afternoon or a quiet morning, where there's only a half a dozen people or less in there, is important. And that's kind of why, like John said, I think there's some advantages with B. The relationship in C of the playground and the splash pad is really strong as well. But it has a much different feel with the Great Lawn, which could be in C. It could be valuable space as well, because it gives you that larger area for flying a kite or throwing a ball or skating or whatever that ends up being in that larger open space.
I think, like, depending upon if the adjacent building does redevelop and what the developer's needs are there, like B is an example, and that parking lot we're showing just south of that new development building, if that wasn't necessarily, as all that space was needed or dedicated, or it even didn't have to be there, like in concept C, and you could turn that into some secondary park lawn and kind of connection and flexible space for that development, then suddenly you're getting kind of a good combination of both worlds, right? You're getting kind of the room creation of the main heart of the park, but then you're also still getting some of the great lawn, flexible use lawn that's in number C. So we haven't heard from Jess yet. Jess, what do you think?
Yeah, I was actually going to say exactly that. I kind of like the idea of the combination of B and C together, if we could remove that parking lot. I like the feel of getting as big of a park as we can, but I can understand that we perhaps need that extra parking. I like you said, the adjacencies of the splash pad and the playground, and the idea that, you could maybe come to a stage of B and your kids could run around in the background. And you'd have a little bit separate, you could still see them. I like the idea of those sorts of activities happening together. I guess I like all of them for different reasons. Not a good answer.
We're
but...
so yeah, no, and I think to me that's the sign of the point that we're at right now. We're trying to vet out enough ideas to see what kind of substance they have, and I think what we really want to do is hear some of the feedback of the public and the steering committee as we work for them. Be able to find out what's really good and bad, and it's likely that it's a hybrid of a number of these. So, Mark, I see you have your hand up, so please feel free.
Yeah, we're in these plans. We're displacing a large amount of parking space, and we're already in a situation where we have quite a bit of congestion at times with parking. I guess I'd like to see if you're going to do this combination of C and B, but put the parking portion alongside the foundation where it'll help the retailers that are currently here.
Okay. Chris, I don't know if you want to, I know Lyle mentioned a little bit parking to the north, but if you want to add on to that at all about some of the parking concerns. That's something, thanks for bringing that up. We've not about in detail yet. That's definitely one of the things that we're going to have to consider.
Yeah, so we've approached the property owner of the north that they have kind of etched out on there. So, I don't disagree with Mark's comment about driving. It's parking on the time of the day. So that was always a concern is when you displace that. I do think as you drive by there, there's also street parking opportunities, maybe adding some more spaces. Usually when you drive by there now, those spots on the street are open because people in that parking lot. So my guess is that there's probably going to be more street parking there. But yeah, we certainly don't want to impact the retail. So that's a good point that Mark brought up. There's a way to, do we know how many spaces are there versus what's on the road? So there's going to be parking on street parking now rather than in that parking lot. So
yeah, Lyle, can you pull up A1 once and we can talk about Mark's comment a little bit more detail, because that's something that we really haven't explored yet. So, I know, Mark, one of the things you mentioned is the current alleyway and the parking along the foundation. And so what I'm guessing that you're getting at is maybe some a creation of a strip of parking along here that can be used in conjunction with that alley, as well as what I'm guessing you're kind of driving at with that. And that's something that we'll definitely look at. And then I think another thing in combination with what Chris was just mentioning too, that the reconstruction and addition of parking along Camp Pier 2 is going to be primary goals of ours. And I see John made a comment of creating walkability and creating parking. John, I'm not sure if you want to expand on that at all as far as what your thoughts were.
I think maybe what he means is creating walkability is more important than creating parking, the greater than signs.
Yeah, John's not here. I mean, I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Oh, he might.
Yep, that's correct. He said so. All right, good. Jesse, I saw that you had your hand up.
Yes. I mean, one of my concerns is with having the parking in conjunction with the park. Again, safety of children, such an issue with people driving there, as well as headlights flashing across the lawn or possibly getting onto the stage. The other thing to think about is, I mean, since the city now did buy the new Wells Fargo or the Wells Fargo building for the new city hall, what is going to become of that city, the current city hall? Could that be used for additional overflow parking? It's a little more of a walk, but I think that could be looked at as a replacement for this parking.
Okay. That Scott, a few comments here, so don't lose track of them. Yeah, right. Even as we started this process, of a new city hall wasn't something that we have talked about in detail yet. So we need to kind of see how that affects our planning as well. And we need to sit down and talk with the city about that and the steering committee too. So I'm glad that Jessica went to the University of Minnesota and was smarter than I was when it came to the greater than signs. And we're not trying to bore anybody to death, but we often find that we can talk about things and explore questions. Everybody, there's just kind of just really leads to a good free flow of thoughts. Easy for me to say. And again, to that survey has got room in it to give us your thoughts. If you're not comfortable talking in front of the group, we totally understand. Jess, was there another comment there?
Yep, I was trying to grab it. Okay, we have thank you for addressing the parking issue. I'm concerned about how this might negatively affect existing businesses in the immediate area. Yes.
Okay. From a parking standpoint, I'm assuming that concern. So we will definitely look at that in more detail. You get your hand up.
Thank you, John. And I'm just going to see if it sparks any conversation.
of having ice in a space like this. So when it's and we've done it all three ways, and just it all depends upon budget and what the community wants to see. Flooded ice is very temperamental because it is subject to the elements. So freeze thaw, and typically when the ice is the best, it's when people don't want to be outside, right? And so we've noticed over kind of our last 30 years of work, as kind of our regional winters have changed around here and become a little bit more warmer, that we've had a really difficult time keeping that ice going. So I'm gonna, before we jump into the ice thing in any more detail, I see Reed has a question. So Reed, please go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, that was actually my comment too on the downtown parking. So thank you for addressing that. I think that still we can look at that a little bit more. In response to TK about the ice, I think underneath it to make good ice. I guess the question is going to be how much that costs and the ongoing costs. That's going to be a big deal. So I actually really like what you guys, you showed some pictures of other things that could be done during the winter months, you know, sculptures, ice sculptures, snow sculptures. You know, there's some also winter sporting or fun events that could be done in that area. So I think broadening the scope from just ice is probably a good idea. I have a question. I had to step away for a moment, so I apologize if this was already addressed. But how important for the downtown park is the position of an event coordinator? That's my concern as a city council member, because I want to see this succeed, but when I look at other towns, they have like full-time staff coordinating the events, cleaning up the park, making sure that it's being used nonstop. And we just don't have people currently in the city who can do that. So it would be adding at least one new position. But how important is that?
So thank you, Councilman. I think from our perspective, ultimately, over the life of the plaza, it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody who is full-time, and nor does it need to be someone who's necessarily an employee of the city. Now, while that's not uncommon, we've also seen that position be created between a combination of funding between cities and downtown associations, community foundations, those kind of things, and have it be a hybrid spot that is employed by one of those places. It's not unusual to have somebody be part of coming out of Parks and Recreation, and have it be part of the rec staff to do that. But I think it doesn't have to be a full-time one. And so I think that the smart way to go about that, Reed, is to see what needs are out there, and working with the community foundation and the development foundation and your park staff to kind of explore, are there other city assets that could benefit from somebody like that to help schedule and monitor and activate, and that this space just becomes one of their things that they kind of monitor and look out over. And it could easily be a position that's half-time, or even 16 hours a week to really get this kind of thing scheduled and developed. So Jess, was there another comment? Yeah.
I was, yep, if anyone had any comments about the ice, but we can move on. That we had a comment from Curtis, the guest. Playground and splash pad together is important for parents. I like to see park space for parking would be a waste. If we are building a park, let's build as large of a park as possible. So I think that's a good comment.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from everybody is obviously we want to be some parking in more detail as far as what's being displaced, what can be reaccommodated, so everyone's got a little bit more of a sure footing as to what's happening with parking, and we haven't done that yet. So and that's a really good thing to break up. And I didn't want to cut short Terry's conversation about ice at all. And I wanted to make sure that we got to everybody's questions and comments. But the last thing I'll put out there about the ice, obviously it's really seasonally impacted. We've done synthetic ice as well, flooded ice, refrigerated ice. We just opened the new Block 9 Plaza project in downtown Fargo. That was done in conjunction with a big redevelopment project as well. That's all refrigerated ice, and depending upon the solution and some of the there's operation dollars there. They happen to bring in temporary refrigeration equipment every year. They didn't build permanent stuff. They built that more into their operations budget. So, if we did fixed improvements, that could be anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million, depending upon what the complexity is. And at this point, as I'd mentioned, refrigerated ice is outside of our scope, but we don't want to, cut off any ideas at this point. We want to make sure that they're all soundly vetted. So.
I have a question. This is Julie from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Can you guys hear me?
Julie. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm driving. I apologize for the background noise here, but I'm on
I thought
my
I
way
heard a
down the road
blinker,
right
so
now.
I'm not going crazy. That's good.
Sorry. I know I've been to the square in Rapid City, and I think they have synthetic ice, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk to the group a little bit about what the condition or what the replacement in the spring is for that ice space? Like, obviously it's not winter anymore, so is it turf that goes over that? Is there,
Sure, you bet.
I think there was just some artificial turf over the synthetic ice there, and how usable, the usability of that, and what that can be used for with that structure underneath.
Yeah, no, thank you, Julie. So there's both Rapid City's example and the new Block 9 Plaza in Fargo. Those are both paved surfaces in which they put the ice, which makes it a little bit easier as far as setting up the refrigeration looping and all that kind of stuff. We have a project down in one of the suburbs of Kansas City in a public plaza where they use synthetic ice there, and they actually dig out the turf in that space every fall, put in the synthetic ice grade, and then in the spring they resod it. So they kind of build that into their operations of the plaza. And that's how they just preferred to do it. So in our case, depending upon what we think the exact solution should be, if it's synthetic ice, I like the flexibility of that because you can kind of create a bigger space or a smaller space, but usually those come in just like 4x8 sheets, and you can put it down that way. And there's a number of really nice synthetic ice manufacturers out there. But what's nice about that is you can use that in other locations too. So it doesn't need to be just in this space through the winter time. While it could be, you could continue to use that in the spring, summer, and fall somewhere else throughout the community as well. And so it has a little bit of flexibility. And Julie's comment also brings up another kind of detailed conversation that we'll have to have down the road. And that's kind of the main event lawn and what that is comprised of, because obviously that could be natural turf or it could be synthetic turf. And so depending upon what our ultimate answer is with that, Julie, and if we did decide to do some sort of ice feature, working in tandem with that would have to be a decision that we'd have to explore as well. So usually it's easiest to put down ice on top of a harder surface, but when you're talking about flooding it and doing it in more of a traditional way without refrigeration, that paved surface kind of works against you because it also attracts the sun more. And so that sun really melts that ice a little bit more. And we have a number of reinforced slab rinks that we've done that are just traditionally flooded, and their use over the last few years has been less and less every year. So I do, yeah, you bet. And that's where I do like Councilman Holine's suggestion of when it comes to winter activities that we explore other options beyond just skating. I think skating is, I don't want to call it cliche, but it's kind of the conventional thing that you put in a public space. And I think if we just need to be careful that if we can't do it really well, that we need to see what other potential opportunities we have beyond that. So yes, Reed, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with the ice, I mean, I agree with your comments, and I still think if possible, we should have ice there, but hopefully sometime in the near future, Watertown will have either a new ice rink or a revamped one. And part of that would be to attract more kids and more people to that location. So we don't, I still like ice at a downtown location, but maybe I like the idea of opening it up to other winter activities, because we will probably have ice skating offered at a different city location as well. And we don't need to like compete against each other. Compete against
and
ourselves.
it's gonna, I mean, and no matter what, if you do a new off-site built ice environment, it's just gonna be an easier maintainable operational facility than creating it in a plaza. There's no question about, over the long run for the community, having ice that's covered, whether it's, you know, 4 walls and a roof or just a roof, is a much better solution long term. So I don't want to necessarily get stuck on one particular topic. Is there, as we're just kind of vetting out ideas, is there any other thoughts or comments out there from the group? Okay. Hearing none, we can definitely stick on for a few minutes here if anybody wants to discuss anything in more detail, but we want you to go to the survey that will be sent out via city information here. Survey Monkey link is right there. It's surveymonkey.com/r/Watertown DT Plaza 1. Please take a little bit of time to fill that out for us and spread the word that that plaza is out there, or that survey is out there. Within the survey is a diagram of each one of the plaza concepts that we reviewed today. We'll be sending or sharing our presentation today. The city will have it to be able to make available to the public, and we'll be sharing it with the steering committee members as well, if you want to talk to them in more detail about any thoughts that you may have. So we want to make this information as readily accessible as we can. If you have a way to share it that hasn't been discussed, please let us know, and we'll look into getting that done. With that, Jess, do you have any comments that you'd like to wrap up with?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming to visit with us tonight and hearing about this project.
Lyle? You're on mute.
There we go. That's better. It's been real exciting to get to this point. Look forward to kind of continuing to see this develop.
All right. I'm not sure if any of our council representatives or anybody from the city would like to have any closing last words, but please do. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate that time. We're very excited to be working on this project. That's good feedback and some discussion points. Gives us some things to focus on here over the holiday break, and as we begin to circle back with our steering committee. And we really appreciate you taking the time